I was 13 the first time I heard her say it. My name is Marin Cole. My mother's name was Evelyn, though people in town called her Evie, like she was made of something soft. But to me, she was always just a sound in another room. A door closing, a fork scraping the sink, the clink of a candle holder being moved without purpose. It was summer, and Jenna was staying with us for the week. Her mom, my mom's sister, was having some kind of surgery, so she got shipped off to us like always. Jenna came with a pink suitcase full of curls, glitter gel, and a voice that floated. She could make any room feel like it was meant for her. That afternoon, I'd been outside reading with the porch fan rattling over my head. When I came inside, I walked down the hall toward the kitchen, slow and invisible, like I'd learned to be. That's when I heard it. "You're the daughter I never had," my mom whispered, and I knew by the softness in her voice that she was touching Jenna's face. That was the sound my mother only made for porcelain, for breakables. I didn't walk into the room. I didn't say a word. I just stood in the doorway between the hallway and the kitchen and stared at the square of sunlight on the linoleum. I remember how it looked. Perfect square, warm light. I remember the smell, old wood polish, the sharp chemical sweetness of hairspray, and a faint trace of gas from the stove pilot light that never stayed lit. I didn't feel much. That's the strange part. I didn't cry or storm off or confront her. That would come later, years later, in waves. But that day, the sentence folded itself into me like paper sharp at the edges, but light in the moment. Something I didn't know how to carry yet. I just let it sit inside me. They laughed in the kitchen. My mom offered Jenna a spoon of something from the pot, and Jenna made a sound like delight. I stood still. I counted the seconds. 37 before they noticed the hallway was quiet. Even then, she didn't turn toward me. She just said, "Oh, there you are," like I was late for something I was never invited to. I sat at the table across from them. Jenna was glowing. Her cheeks flushed from the stove and from being seen. My mom handed her a spoon and said, "Taste that. It's just like my mother used to make." She didn't offer me any. I took a saltine from the basket and chewed it slow. The candle on the windowsill was flickering, even though no one had lit it. That was her thing, candles. Always one in every room. My mother didn't like ceiling lights. Said they were too harsh. She believed in lamps and matches and keeping things soft. She never said that part out loud, but she lived by it. I wasn't soft. I knew that. I didn't shimmer or giggle or lean into compliments the way Jenna did. I was plain. Not ugly, just not remarkable. And in my house, remarkable was the currency. After dinner, Jenna and my mom painted their nails at the kitchen table. I offered to clean up, and my mom said, "That'd be great, honey," without looking at me. So I did. I washed the dishes while they sat laughing about a boy Jenna liked and whether or not he had salon-worthy hair. The sponge in my hand made a squelching sound as I wrung it out. I rinsed a glass and saw that someone's lipstick had left a ghost on the rim. I scrubbed it off and thought it'll all be gone tomorrow. And it was. But the sentence stayed. "You're the daughter I never had." The funny thing about sentences like that, they don't just hurt once. They live. They echo. They crawl out of memory when you least expect it, like music from a room you thought was empty. And when they do, they're never quieter than the first time. They're louder. I remember lying in bed that night staring at the ceiling, with my hands tucked under the pillow like a soldier. I had one of those old CD players with the skip button that always stuck. I played the same track over and over, soft piano music, the kind my mother said gave her a headache. The walls in our house were thin. I could hear them, my mom and Jenna talking low, laughing. "She's so serious all the time," my mom said. "She's smart," Jenna replied. "She always knows stuff. She gets that from her father, my mother answered. But I just wish. The rest was muffled. Or maybe I stopped listening. I don't know why I remember that candle. The one on the windowsill flickering. No one lit it. No one ever did. But in my memory, it glows. A quiet little flame that shouldn't be there but is. Maybe that was me? Maybe that still is me? It didn't stop after that. Of course it didn't. Jenna was the kind of girl people liked before they even knew her. Some people just walk into a room and the air softens for them. Teachers smiled when she raised her hand. Cashiers gave her extra change. Strangers told her she had such good posture. When we were 16, she made varsity cheer like it was just the next logical step in being Jenna. That fall, she came over wearing her cheer jacket, white and navy, with gold stitching our school's hawk logo swooping across the back. My mother reached for it like it was silk. "Oh, honey, you look like a magazine cover," she said, smoothing the shoulder seams like Jenna was her own. I stood next to the sink, drying forks. My hands were damp and wrinkled, and I remember thinking that I must have looked like the before photo in someone else's life. Jenna turned toward me, laughing. "You should try out next year, Marin. We'd kill it together." I didn't even smile. Not because I didn't want to, but because I already knew what my mother would say. And she did, right on cue. "She's not the type," she said with a little shrug, like it wasn't cruel, just true. "Marin's always had her own path. Haven't you, sweetheart?" I nodded, because what else do you do when someone tells you who you are? That was her favorite line for me. You've got your own path. She used it like a compliment, like I'd been given something special. But it always sounded like a door shutting softly behind me. Your own path meant not this one. Not the one I like. I started walking more at night around that age. Just little loops around the neighborhood under the amber streetlights. I'd pass other houses with big windows and warm yellow kitchens. Sometimes you could see the flicker of a TV, or a father helping with homework, or a mom braiding her kid's hair while spaghetti boiled. I never really wanted their lives. I just wanted the quiet certainty of being wanted. At home, Jenna and my mom would be baking or watching old movies on the living room floor. I always came in through the back door into the darkened kitchen, where the scent of sugar and heat still hung in the air. And always, there'd be one fork left in the sink, like a forgotten punctuation mark. I'd wash it without being asked. One night, I found a note stuck to the fridge. "Jenna, you make the best cookies, save me 2 Evie." There was no note for me, not even a help yourself. I wasn't jealous of Jenna. I want to make that clear. Jenna didn't ask to be chosen. She didn't even seem to know she was. That made it worse in some ways, because when someone wins without trying, it means you're not even in the game. And the truth is, Jenna was good. Kind even. She'd invite me to sleepovers, offer me her glitter lotion, tell me my handwriting was so perfect, it's scary. But there was always a ceiling between us, invisible, low, and firm. A ceiling I could never stand all the way up under. That winter, I caught the flu and missed 2 weeks of school. I was holed up in bed, feverish and shaky, and my mom was halfway attentive in that clinical, distant way. She brought me water, left soup on the tray. But one night, I woke up cold and found her asleep on the couch next to Jenna, who was in town for the weekend. They were watching a movie, curled up under one of our old knit blankets. The living room glowed with candlelight and TV blue. I stood there in my old socks and oversized t-shirt, shivering from the fever. My mom looked up, saw me, and said, "Go back to bed, honey." Not "Are you okay?" Not "Do you need anything?" Just go back to where you belong. I went back to my room and pulled the blankets over my head. I remember my skin was hot, but my insides were cold. Like the sickness had spread somewhere deeper than my body. After that, I stopped expecting anything. That's how I coped. I turned my expectations into air nothing, to hold nothing to break. One day, I came home from school and found Jenna crying on our back porch. I sat down beside her silent. "I didn't get into Belmont," she whispered, wiping her eyes. That was her dream school: cosmetology and business all in one place with fancy dorms and French coffee. I didn't know what to say. I just nodded. Then I took the ring off my thumb, a small silver band I'd bought from a vendor at the county fair, and pressed it into her palm. "It's for good luck," I said. "Try again." Jenna looked at me like I'd given her something sacred. And maybe I had. Not the ring, but the part of me that still believed giving meant something. Later that night, I heard her tell my mother. "She's so thoughtful, Aunt Evie." My mother didn't say anything for a beat. Then yes. "Marin's very responsible." Responsible. Like a tax return. Like a spare tire. Not good, not lovely, not mine. I went to bed with my headphones in, listening to the same instrumental track on repeat. The one with the low piano note that always hits right at the 32-second mark. I watched the shadows of tree branches ripple on my wall cast by the streetlight outside. I didn't cry. I'd stopped crying by then. But I did make a quiet promise to myself I would keep walking my path. Even if no one ever waited at the end. I used to think silence was something empty. Like a pause. Like a breath between thoughts. But silence in our house was a thing, a presence. It lived between words under glances, inside drawers where photos should have been. It wasn't the absence of sound. It was the refusal to speak. When I was 17, Jenna had her sweet 16 late. She was born in winter but wanted a spring party, something floral and unforgettable, she said. My mother helped plan the whole thing. Catered food live, DJ twinkle lights strung across a rented hall. There were 3 cakes. One for photos, one for guests, and a gluten-free one because Jenna was trying something new. The week before the party, I asked if I could come. Not because I was invited. I wasn't. But because they were using our house for the prep, and I was already helping hauling folding chairs, tying ribbons, making playlist CDs. My mother paused and looked at me the way she sometimes did, like I was a distant cousin asking for a loan. "You don't have anything to wear?" she said. "It's semi-formal." I told her I'd figure something out. I ended up borrowing a dress from a girl I barely knew at school. Burgundy velvet, a little tight in the shoulders, with one of those hidden zippers that always felt like it might snap under pressure. I found some old flats in my closet, scuffed but wearable, and tried to pin my hair up the way I'd seen Jenna do. In the mirror, I looked like a stagehand pretending to be a lead. The party was huge. At least 100 people. Jenna wore a pale, pink tulle dress with crystal beading. She floated. And when she entered the room, people actually clapped. My mother teared up. She dabbed her eyes with a cloth napkin and whispered, "Look at her. Just look at her." I did. And then I looked at my mother. The expression on her face wasn't just pride. It was something more fragile, almost worshipful. Like Jenna was a painting she was afraid to touch. It hit me then, not all love is loud. Some of it's a spotlight. And some of us are left standing backstage squinting. I didn't say much at the party. I stood near the punch table and nodded at people I recognized. One girl told me she liked my dress, and I said thanks even though it wasn't mine. I kept tugging at the sleeves. They were too short. There was a moment, small but clear, when Jenna came over and hugged me. She was glowing from dancing, laughing full of cake and compliments. "I'm so glad you came," she said, and I believed her. But then my mother appeared behind her with a camera in hand and said, "Smile, girls." Only Jenna turned. I didn't make it into the frame. That night I couldn't sleep. The house was too full of helium balloons and leftover noise. I slipped out of bed and walked through the living room, picking up crumpled napkins, spilled glitter, forgotten favors. The light from the street cast shadows across the floor ribbons, wrapping paper footprints. I went into the kitchen and found the velvet dress hanging from the back of a chair. I stood there for a long time just looking at it. I remember thinking it looked more like a costume than anything else. Like it belonged to someone I was never meant to be. Then I opened the cabinet under the sink and found the garbage bag. I almost stuffed the dress inside, not in anger, just to disappear it. But I didn't. Instead, I folded it neatly and placed it in a brown paper bag, then tucked it behind my door. I'd return it on Monday. Before I went back to bed, I lit the candle on the counter. Just for a second. Just to watch it flicker. The match burned down fast, singed my fingers. I stared at the flame and whispered something I wouldn't remember the next day. The silence in that room was velvet too. The next morning, my mother handed Jenna a small envelope. Inside was a gift certificate to an expensive salon in the city, the kind of place with marble sinks and coffee menus. Jenna squealed, hugged her, said she'd use it to get layers before her senior photos. My mother turned to me and said, "You should do something with your hair too. Marin, you've got good bones." That was how she gave compliments. Through back doors. Like maybe if she slipped one into the sentence sideways, I wouldn't notice. I didn't answer. I just nodded and cleared the table. Later in the laundry room, I found one of Jenna's earrings, a tiny silver heart with a missing back. I held it in my palm for a while. Then I put it in the empty jewelry box my grandmother had given me. I told myself I'd give it back. But I never did. People talk about decisions like they're moments, like there's some dramatic click when everything changes. A suitcase slamming shut a phone call made a final fight in the rain. But that's not how it happened for me. When I enlisted, there wasn't a moment. It was more like a slow erosion. Something quiet and steady that finally broke off and fell. I was 19. Halfway through community college, bored out of my mind, working nights at a shipping warehouse with halogen lights and co-workers who smelled like Axe and Red Bull. I wasn't failing. I wasn't falling apart. I was just drifting. The recruiter's office was in a strip mall 2 doors down from a pawn shop. I walked in on a Tuesday after class, mostly just to feel the air conditioning. I left with a folder full of paperwork and a date circled in red. When I told my mother, she said I thought you hated authority. I shrugged. Maybe I just hate being invisible. She didn't ask what I meant. She just nodded, like that explained everything. Jenna was the one who cried. She came over with cookies and a glittery card that said, "You're gonna be badass," in bubble letters. She gave me a hug that smelled like peach lotion and told me she was proud of me, which made me feel like I'd already done something brave just by signing my name. My mom handed me a Ziploc bag of homemade trail mix and a fruitcake she'd bought from the holiday clearance aisle. "Something to snack on when you get there," she said, handing it over like it was some kind of heirloom. I held it and smiled because it was easier than saying, "You didn't even hug me." The day I shipped out Jenna and my mom drove me to the processing station. It was early. Barely light out. I watched the clouds turn orange from the back seat while they talked about traffic and gas prices. When we pulled up to the curb, my mother put the car in park, but didn't get out. Jenna did. She hugged me tight, her eyes wet. "Promise me you'll write." I nodded. I wanted to say something meaningful, something about loyalty or memories, or how it felt to always be the second choice. But all I said was, "Take care of her, okay?" Jenna didn't understand what I meant, but she smiled like she did. I looked at my mom through the passenger window. She gave a small wave, the kind you give a stranger you're not sure you recognize. And then I left. Boot camp was the opposite of everything I grew up with. Loud, brutal, honest. Nothing was left unsaid. If you messed up, you got screamed at. If you were strong, you got noticed. No candlelight. No velvet. No silence. I bled. I bruised. I made my bed with hospital corners and stood straighter than I ever had before. I also started writing letters. Not to Jenna. Not even to friends. To my mother. Just short ones. Clean block letters on plain paper. I'd describe the weather, mention a girl in my unit who reminded me of a dog we once had, ask how things were going back home. She never wrote back. Not once. I sent 5 letters that first year. Then I stopped. There was this thing I started doing around that time, saving something small from every place I went. A pressed flower from Georgia, a bullet casing from a desert training in Nevada, a napkin from a street cart in D.C. I'd label them with the date and toss them into a shoebox I kept under my cot. I called it proof of presence because no one back home seemed to know where I was. Jenna messaged me sometimes. Mostly updates, new job, new guy, new hair. She once said, "Mom says your photo's on the fridge now," but I already knew she meant her mom, not mine. One day, after a training rotation, I walked into the base lounge and saw the TV showing a local news segment, a beauty expo in our hometown. Jenna was on screen smiling big with a microphone in her hand, talking about her new stylist certification. Behind her, holding up a sign that said "Support Small Businesses," was my mother. She looked proud. She looked lit up. I stood there in my uniform boots, still dusty, a bruise darkening on my collarbone from a close combat drill. My name tag had started to fray at the edges, and I thought I could disappear right now and they'd still have a party. That night, I burned one of the letters I'd written, but never sent. It wasn't rage. It was something quieter, a letting go. I lit the match, watched the flame crawl up the edge, and dropped it into an empty coffee can. The room smelled like smoke and old paper. I left the window open all night. There are things I don't talk about even now. Not because they're painful, not in the way people think pain works. Some things don't bleed. They just sit, like frost on glass that never melts even in sun. I kept writing my mother long after I stopped expecting a reply. The letters changed. They got shorter, sharper. Sometimes they were only a sentence. January 14th. Got promoted today. Logistics NCO. It matters to someone, I think. March 3rd. Broke a tooth on bad chow. Thought of your fruitcake. June 9th. One of the girls reminded me of Jenna. Same laugh. Same need to be adored. I never sent those. I kept them in a small box in my footlocker, folded into tiny squares like prayers nobody said out loud. Then came the funeral. It was for a cousin we barely saw, someone twice removed on my dad's side. The kind of funeral where half the names on the guest book are guessed. But it was local, and I had leave. So I went home. I hadn't been back in almost 5 years. The house was smaller than I remembered. Same peeling paint, same wind chime by the porch that only rang in storms. My mother opened the door like she wasn't surprised. Like I was just back from the store, not an entire life away. "Well," she said. "Look who it is." I said, "Hey, Mom." She stepped aside. No hug, just enough space to pass through. Inside, everything was quiet. Candles on the mantel, a floral couch that had been reupholstered but still sagged on the left side. Jenna's photos on every wall, senior portraits, graduation, her certificate framed with gold matting. She looked the same in all of them, polished, beloved. I stood in the living room and tried to find myself. I wasn't there. Nothing of me. No baby photo. No yearbook. Not even the crooked drawing I'd made in 3rd grade, a horse that looked like a dog with long legs, which she'd once pinned to the fridge for a day and then quietly buried in a drawer. I wandered into the dining room. There, under the TV stand, was a stack of old mail. One envelope caught my eye, plain military issue paper faded by sun and dust. I picked it up and turned it over. It was one of mine, unopened. I didn't say anything. That night, after the funeral, Jenna came by with wine and a plastic tub of cupcakes. She hugged me like we'd just seen each other last week. "You look strong," she said, like intense in a good way. We sat in the kitchen, just the two of us. My mother had gone to bed early. The wine loosened Jenna's tongue. "She missed you, you know?" she said, sipping from a glass that still had lipstick smudges from earlier. She just didn't know how to show it. I didn't reply. "She kept all your letters," Jenna added. "I saw them. In a box." I nodded. Not because I believed it, but because I'd already seen them still sealed, still unread. Keeping isn't the same as caring. Some people collect guilt like antiques. Later that week I went looking. The box was exactly where I thought it would be, the hallway cabinet behind the stack of VHS tapes we hadn't used in decades. It was labeled Claire. Army stuff. Claire. I stared at it for a long time. Inside were my medals, my service photo, 2 folded flags from ceremonies no one attended. The letters were there too. Neatly rubber-banded. No creases to show they'd ever been opened. They looked like artifacts. Like they'd been preserved for display, not connection. I took one out and read it myself. It was from my first month at Fort Jackson. My handwriting was tight and nervous. "Hi, Mom. I'm learning a lot. The boots are stiff, and the food's weird, but I'm okay. I helped a girl who twisted her ankle. The sergeant said I had good instincts. I thought you'd like that." I stared at the sentence. "I thought you'd like that." I folded it back and put it in my pocket. Later that night, I sat on the back steps with a cigarette I didn't smoke. I'd picked it up out of habit, something I'd learned from other soldiers. Smoke as punctuation. As silence. The stars were out. The porch light buzzed with moths. I thought about how silence had always been my mother's gift, and I realized something. I'd inherited it. Not her smile, not her softness, but her silence. The ability to say everything by saying nothing. The next morning, I left a note on the table. Just one sentence. I read the letters. "Some things are better kept unopened." I walked out the door without waiting for a response. She didn't follow, and I didn't look back. I was stationed in Germany when I got the message. Jenna had tagged me in a post, "Dreams don't work unless you do," with a photo of a dusty shopfront and her face pressed against the glass like a child at a candy store. The caption said, "This could really be it." I stared at the image longer than I should have. The building was nothing special. Pale bricks, cracked signage, a faded awning. But I knew that look in her eyes. She'd wanted a salon since we were little. Even back then, she'd take her dolls and brush their hair into high buns, low chignons, elaborate braids. Once she tried to perm mine with lemon juice and a curling iron. My scalp hurt for 3 days. That dream never changed for her. Unlike mine, which I guess never existed. A few days later, I got a call from my mother. Rare enough for me to check twice before I picked up. "Jenna's loan fell through," she said. "No, hello. No, how are you? The bank pulled out last minute. She's devastated." I waited, knowing there was more. There always was. I told her we'd figure something out. "We?" That word was heavy coming from her. It was the kind of word people use when they don't mean them. "What are you asking?" I said flatly. "She just needs a little help with the down payment. You've always been good with money." And there it was. I didn't ask how much. I didn't ask why Jenna didn't call herself. I just said, "Send me the details." 2 weeks later, $48,000 disappeared from my account. I moved it without fanfare. No announcement. Just numbers shift. I told myself it was an act of detachment. That it didn't matter. That it was just money. I didn't expect a thank you. But even I didn't expect what I got. A week after the wire went through, Jenna posted a photo of herself and my mother standing outside the salon, holding a pair of ceremonial gold keys. The caption read, "Dreams come true when you're loved, I read it over and over, like maybe the sentence would break open on the fifth or sixth pass and show me something I missed. Instead, I just felt the same old coldness. Not sharp, just dull, familiar. The post had hundreds of comments. "You deserve it, Jenna. So proud of you, girl. Aunt Evie's always been your biggest fan. I wasn't mentioned. Not tagged, not hinted at, just invisible." I didn't cry. That part of me had dried up years ago. But I felt something settle in my chest, like a brick placed gently on my ribs. Later that night, I checked my email thinking maybe there was a quiet message waiting. Something my mother or Jenna hadn't posted for show. A private note? A single word? There was nothing. I went back to work the next morning like it hadn't happened. Pushed crates, ran schedules, organized cargo routes, precise physical measurable work. Every inch accounted for. Every name on paper. Nothing unspoken. But my hands were tight on the clipboard. My mouth dry. I was quieter than usual. That weekend, I booked leave. 3 months later, I came back to Ohio. Not for them. Not even for closure. Just to see the building I'd bought for someone else. I drove there at night. The salon wasn't open yet, but the renovations had begun. New paint, polished glass, soft pendant lights that gave the place a dreamy glow. I stood across the street in the cold hands shoved in my coat, watching Jenna and my mother inside. They were arranging chairs. My mother held up a gold-framed mirror, and Jenna nodded, beaming. I watched them laugh about something I'd never know. I thought about walking across, tapping the glass, waving. But I didn't. Instead, I turned and walked 3 blocks to an old diner I used to pass after school. It was mostly empty, one couple, one old man at the counter. The server looked tired. The coffee was burned. I ordered toast and eggs and sat there until my breath stopped fogging the window. When I finally got back to the hotel, there was a message on my phone. It was from Jenna. "Hey, just saw your name on one of the business documents. I didn't know you were helping. That's... wow. Seriously, I don't know what to say." I didn't reply. Not out of spite, not even out of hurt. Just clarity. She didn't know. Because no one told her. Because my mother had taken the money and turned it into love, but only for Jenna. As if I had no part in it. As if I'd just handed over a little silence gift wrapped. That night, I opened one of the letters I'd never sent. This one from Kuwait. June 22nd, still alive, still working. Bought a pocket knife that folds better than my spine. Thought of you today when someone asked if I had any siblings. I said no. I don't know why. Maybe because the silence between us never stopped sounding like an answer. I read it once. Then I burned it in the hotel sink. No drama. No ceremony. Just flame. Just proof that it was mine. There are objects that hold more than weight. They carry temperature memory, something sharp that doesn't show on the surface. The bronze comb was one of those things. I found it in the bottom of a plastic bin while clearing out the storage unit behind my mother's house, the one she called the catch-all. There were holiday decorations, old VHS tapes, a broken floor lamp, and a stack of Avon catalogs from the 90s still wrapped in plastic. The comb was small, dented along one edge, about the length of my palm. It still had a red thread knotted in the teeth. Synthetic. Cheap. I knew exactly where it came from. Jenna's 7th grade recital dress. She wore red that year. Her hair was curled and pulled back in a bun so tight you could see the shape of her skull. The day before, I'd borrowed the comb to style my own hair in the mirror, trying to mimic hers. My mother caught me halfway through. "That's Jenna's," she said, stepping into the room. Her voice wasn't angry. It was quiet. Careful. Like I was holding something sacred I had no right to touch. Be careful with other people's things. I remember freezing comb halfway through my hair. I pulled it out slowly, handed it back, and said nothing. That was the rule in our house: be careful with what's not yours. I hadn't understood then that she wasn't talking about the comb. She was talking about Jenna. She was always talking about Jenna. Back in the storage unit, I sat down on an overturned laundry basket and held the comb in my hand. It was cold. It smelled faintly of plastic and old perfume, the kind my mother used to keep in the back of her drawer, lavender and talc in memory. I turned it over, running my thumb along the crooked spine. The red thread was still caught there, tiny and stubborn. Some part of me wanted to throw it, break it, crush it under my boot just to see if it would finally stop feeling like hers. Instead, I placed it on my knee and just stared. It had been over a year since the salon opened. I hadn't gone to the grand opening, but I saw the photos. Jenna in a white dress with gold accents. My mother standing behind her, one hand on her shoulder, the other holding scissors for the ceremonial ribbon cutting. The post said, "Couldn't have done it without the support of my Mamyas forever family." Again, no mention of me, not even in the fine print. I visited once, slipped in during a weekday afternoon. Jenna wasn't there. I sat in the waiting area, watched a stylist in training trim, split ends for a college girl. The lighting was warm. The floors gleamed. There were orchids in every corner. My mother's touch was in the details: the candle by the desk, the antique mirror above the coffee cart, the silver bowl of mints with her favorite brand. I asked the receptionist how long they'd been open. She smiled. 1 year and 4 months. Her tone was proud, protective. Jenna built this place from the ground up. Her mom helped a lot. Her mom, that caught me. I nodded and left without introducing myself. The day I found the comb, I took it home and placed it on my desk. I stared at it while the sun fell behind the pine trees outside. The light hit it just right, made it look like gold for a second. Fake gold, but still shining. I thought about that night before the recital, the way I had turned to the mirror, wishing I could be that girl, the one who got their hair curled, their picture taken, their name spoken like sugar. I wasn't angry anymore, not like before. What I felt was older, worn down, not bitter, just clear. That comb had always belonged to her, not because I couldn't touch it, but because I was never meant to want it. That's the part they don't tell you, that some things are rigged without malice. It's not that they hate you. They just forget you weren't designed to fit the frame. I picked up the comb again. It felt lighter than I remembered. I set it next to a photo of my unit, all of us in desert fatigues. Dirt streaked across our faces, one girl flipping the camera off behind sunglasses. That was the photo no one framed, but it was the one that felt the most like home. The next morning, I mailed the comb to Jenna. No note, just the comb in a padded envelope. Red thread still tangled in the teeth. I imagined her opening it, frowning a little, trying to remember. I hoped she wouldn't ask my mother. I hoped she'd just sit with it for a while like I did. Some things don't need explanations. They just need to arrive. When my last deployment ended, I didn't go home. I floated. Baltimore, Austin. A year in Flagstaff, sleeping in a trailer behind a bar where nobody asked questions. I took on contract work, inventory audits, transport analysis, things that felt structured but shallow. I liked the feeling of being somewhere, but never in it. It was Jenna who said the word first. "You should come home for a while. Mom's got the spare room." Mom, not your mom, just mom. Like there was no distinction anymore. Just a woman in a house where time had stopped pretending. I didn't say yes. I didn't say no. I just showed up with 2 bags and a box I hadn't opened in 7 years. The room smelled like lemon cleaner and old linens. My bed from high school was gone, replaced with a futon and a narrow desk. There was a folded quilt at the end, neatly pressed. "This used to be the guest room," my mother said, standing in the doorway. "Jenna stayed here during beauty school." "You'll like it. It gets the good light in the morning." I looked around. No trace of Jenna now, but still no trace of me. It was like someone had wiped the memory clean, sanded it down to a shape that could belong to anyone. That night, I wandered through the hallway looking for, I don't know, a photograph, a keepsake, something with my name on it. Jenna's face was everywhere. Baby pictures, prom night, a soft focus graduation shot where her smile reached both edges of the frame. All mounted in gold or rosewood, some layered with dust, but none forgotten. I found myself in only one place. The top shelf of the hallway cabinet in a box labeled Claire. Army stuff. Claire. Again. I brought the box down and opened it on the living room floor. Inside were my medal's rank insignia, a laminated news clipping from a local paper with my name misspelled in the caption. Beneath all that was a manila envelope. My photo taken on base dress blues, straight posture, a tight jaw I barely recognized as mine. The photo hadn't yellowed. It was pristine, unbent, untouched. My mother came in as I was kneeling over the open box. "I didn't want to mess with your things," she said. "Didn't want to get anything wrong." I didn't answer. Not because I didn't have words, but because the room already had too many of them. Silent ones. Unspoken. Hung in the air like dust motes. She sat on the armrest of the couch and folded her hands. "You always had your father's seriousness," she said after a while. "I never knew what to do with it." I looked at the box again. "I didn't need anything done with it, I know," she said, then softer. "But Jenna did. She needed all of it, all the fuss, all the applause, and I didn't." My voice didn't rise. But the question landed between us like a crack in plaster. Hairline at first, then spreading. She didn't answer. Not really. She just got up, walked to the mantel, and adjusted one of the candles that hadn't been lit in months. "You never asked for anything," she said. Not once. I could have told her that was because asking meant revealing the part of me that still hoped. And she'd never been gentle with hope. Not when it was mine. Instead, I just nodded. Later in the room, I unpacked slowly. I laid my boots by the door, stacked my uniforms in the closet, placed my medals in the drawer face down. Then I opened the bottom flap of my bag and pulled out something small, a paper matchbook from a ramen bar in Seoul, soft with wear. I lit one and held it over the candle she'd left on the nightstand. It caught flame slow and blue at first, then gold. I watched it flicker, unsure if I wanted to blow it out or let it consume the wick. The wax melted quick. It had been sitting for years untouched. Waiting. The room filled with the scent of vanilla and ash. For the first time in a long while, I slept without dreaming. The next morning, I made coffee and sat outside. Jenna pulled into the driveway 20 minutes later. She got out of the car with a bag of muffins and a smile that made it feel like none of it had happened. We sat in silence, sipping from chipped mugs. "I'm glad you're here," she said. "Really?" I nodded. "Me too." And I almost meant it. The soft opening of the salon felt like walking into someone else's celebration, the kind where you don't belong, but were invited anyway, out of obligation or oversight. Jenna greeted me like a talk show host. Arms wide, eyes glowing. She wore ivory, not white, more chic, she said. Gold bangles on her wrist jingled every time she hugged someone. She hugged me too gently, like I might vanish. "It's your win, too," she whispered in my ear, the way people whisper things they hope will erase history. I didn't say anything, just smiled in that trained way, controlled corners of the mouth, no teeth eyes neutral. The place was beautiful, no denying that. Cream walls, brass fixtures, framed sketches of hairstyles in black ink, candlelight in every corner. My mother's touch again, soft and curated, like she'd finally found a place where she could arrange the world to her liking. They had champagne flutes personalized with Jenna's logo, JC Studio Beauty defined. I picked one up and stared at it for too long. It felt too light in my hand. My mother stood behind the reception desk glowing with pride. I watched her hand out drinks, smile wide nod like a proud architect watching her building hold. Someone bumped into me with a tray of cupcakes and said, "Family is everything, huh?" I didn't respond. I walked through the back hallway, past the restroom, past a closed door marked staff only, and found the back exit. I stepped out into the cool evening air and leaned against the brick wall. I reached into my pocket and pulled out a cigarette I'd kept more for ritual than for use. My hands were steady. Too steady. That worried me. Behind my left ear, I felt the old scar itch, the one from training where I'd fallen flat during an obstacle course and sliced myself on a corner of gravel embedded in metal. It bled hard. I hadn't even noticed until the blood hit my shoulder. A trainer screamed, "You're leaking coal," like I was defective. I touched the scar lightly. It pulsed, not with pain, with memory. My uniform from that day had 3 blood stains. I washed it 5 times. Never came out. I kept the shirt, still have it. In that moment, outside Jenna's dream, the scent of hair product and sugar wafting from inside, I thought about the weight of symbols. Hair, blood, firelight. All 3 had followed me, tangled themselves through my life like invisible threads. I looked through the glass door. Jenna was giving a speech. She was thanking donors, mentors, her teachers, her mom. Not once did her eyes scan the crowd for me. I watched her smile and say something about the importance of belief, how when someone believes in you, really believes in you, everything changes. People clapped. My mother looked at her like she was the sun. I took a long drag of the cigarette. It tasted like dust and maybe regret. I didn't feel angry. That's the part I keep coming back to. I didn't feel anything sharp. Just an old ache, slow and settled. The kind of ache you stop treating not because it's healed, but because it's yours now. I flicked the ash and let it fall into the alley gravel. Then I walked to the edge of the lot and looked up. The sky was the color of metal, soft pink clouds, like wounds that hadn't decided whether to close. When I went back in, no one noticed. Or if they did, they didn't say. Jenna was posing for photos. My mother was lighting another candle on a side table near the entrance, her small, personal tradition replicated here, like a signature. I watched her fingers move with care, the match held between thumb and forefinger like something sacred. She didn't flinch when the flame caught. She never flinched for fire, only silence. I moved through the room like smoke. People smiled at me, polite, curious, disconnected. I smiled back. At one point, someone offered to take a group photo. "Family shot," they said. I declined. Said I had to take a call. I stepped out again, not into the alley this time, but the sidewalk out front. The salon glowed behind me. A cathedral for hair and curated love. Inside, laughter, music, applause. I sat on the curb, legs folded, spine straight. I looked down at my hands. The same hands that had stacked munitions, written field reports, pulled bodies from wreckage. They didn't look like hands made for ribbon cuttings or champagne toasts. That night, after the party, I walked back. Not home, not really, but to my mother's house. She was already there in the kitchen, washing dishes by hand like she always did. The dishwasher had never been used, not once. She glanced up as I came in. "You left early. I was tired." She nodded. She was happy tonight. She should be. Something about the silence between us felt deeper than usual. Like a tunnel we'd both entered from different ends and were now standing in the middle of staring. She wiped a wine glass dry and set it down. I know I wasn't always... She paused. Easy. I didn't look at her. No, you weren't. The candle by the sink was burning low. I reached over and snuffed it with my fingers. She flinched. The key was small. Silver smooth-edged, stamped with the number 9 on the back. It came in a little envelope slid across the salon counter during a quiet Tuesday morning. For emergencies, Jenna had said with a smile too soft to press against. And because I trust you. I took it without speaking, pocketed it like something delicate or dangerous. At the time, I thought it was both. I didn't tell her I'd already been there before the ribbon was even cut, that I knew where the fuse box was, that I'd memorized the layout before the paint had dried, that when the contractors packed up their last roll of cable and turned off the lights, I'd stood alone inside the silence she was about to fill. The key lived on my nightstand for weeks. Some nights, I held it in my hand before sleep, letting the cool metal press into my palm. Other nights, I placed it between the pages of a book I wasn't reading, then forgot which one. I wasn't waiting for anything to happen. I just wanted to be the one holding the door for once. One morning, I walked to the salon before it opened. I used the key. The lock clicked easily. The air inside was still faint with eucalyptus oil and something sweeter like coconut shampoo. I sat in the front chair, the kind they use for consultations. Soft leather, no scuffs. A small round mirror faced me. I didn't look in it. Instead, I stared at the gold trim on the edges of the shelving. It caught the morning light like it was meant to be looked at and loved. I closed my eyes, tried to imagine being someone else, someone who belonged in that chair, someone who had their hair done as a form of care, not camouflage. I tried to remember if my mother had ever brushed my hair gently. I couldn't. When I opened my eyes, the room hadn't changed. But I had that feeling, the one that settles in after a dream you can't explain. You wake up, and for a few seconds, you don't know where or who you are. Then you remember. You always remember. I placed the key on the table next to the register. Then I picked it up again. Not out of fear, not out of indecision, out of clarity. I wasn't ready to give it back. The next time I saw Jenna, she was updating the website. She showed me a new section, Our Story. It featured her smiling with scissors, my mother adjusting a vase in the background, and a quote in italic script, "All I ever needed was one person to believe in me." I didn't ask who she meant. I already knew. Jenna caught me looking and said, "You've always been a part of this, Marin. You know that, right?" I nodded. "Sure." She reached across the table and touched my hand. Her nails were pink, perfectly shaped, a small rhinestone on each ring finger. "It's not just about hair, it's about transformation." I smiled at that. "Is that what this place is?" I asked. "A chrysalis." She laughed. "God, I love when you talk like that. You're so poetic sometimes." I wanted to say it wasn't poetry. It was just how my brain worked. When you've spent years packing, unpacking, repacking your life, you start to see everything as a container. Later that night, I sat in my car outside the salon, turning the key over and over in my hand. The porch light above the salon sign flickered, even though it had just been replaced. I watched it blink. On. Off. On. There was nothing I wanted to destroy. That surprised me. Not even envy. Not even grief. I just wanted the key to mean something. Anything. But keys don't open the past. They only open the present. That night, I placed the key inside an envelope. Just one. Plain white. No return address. I didn't mail it. Not yet. I kept it by the door, waiting for the moment when it felt like letting go and not just disappearing. 2 days later, My mother called me into the kitchen. She was holding a photo in one hand, one of Jenna and me as kids, both of us laughing on the trampoline behind the old house. She traced my face with her thumb, careful like she might smudge the ink. "I don't remember this day," she said. "I do," I said. "Jenna broke her sandal, and you gave her yours." She looked up. "You were always so quiet. I was always watching." She blinked. "You were such a good kid, Marin. Always took care of yourself." I waited. Sometimes people leave spaces in their sentences for love to crawl in. But the space stayed empty. I walked back to my room, held the key one last time. It was lighter now. I could finally feel the moment inside it. Not a betrayal, not an apology, just a weight I no longer needed. My mother got sick slowly. That's how it works with her kind of illness, the kind that starts soft, like forgetting where you parked, and ends hard, like forgetting the names of your children. If she ever knew mine fully. The doctors called it early onset. I didn't need a diagnosis. I saw it in the way she stirred her tea too fast, like she was trying to remember what she was supposed to be doing. Jenna took her to most of the appointments. I came when I could, when Jenna asked, when the weeks had too many days for her to handle alone. One morning in late October, I sat with her in the waiting room while Jenna argued with the billing office about insurance codes. My mother had a fleece blanket draped across her lap, even though the room wasn't cold. She turned toward me slow, like her body had to remember which way her voice was going. "You always were good in a crisis," she said. I looked up. "It's not a crisis. It's just Wednesday." She smiled a little, not warm, but not cruel either. "Just tired." Her fingers moved against the armrest like she was smoothing fabric that wasn't there. "I wonder what it would have been like," she said, "if you'd liked girl things." I didn't answer. Not because I was angry, but because the sentence had no interest in me. It was something she was saying to herself about herself. A mirror being polished, not a bridge being built. I thought of the velvet dress, the recital comb, the notes left only for Jenna. I thought of the silence in every room I grew up in, how it gathered in corners like lint, soft but dense, waiting for someone to call it by name. My mother stared at the floor. "I tried," she said. "I really did." I nodded. "I know." She didn't ask what I knew. She didn't ask what I needed. She didn't ask at all. That was her way. Always had been. Love, but without questions. Affection, but not curiosity. Later that day, after we'd gotten her settled on the couch with her tea and a crossword she wouldn't finish, Jenna pulled me aside in the hallway. "She's worse at night," she said. "Last week she thought I was you." I raised an eyebrow. "What did she say?" Jenna hesitated. She said, "Don't wear that. You look sad in black." I blinked. "She always told me to wear black," Jenna said. Said it made me look elegant. We stood there side by side, and I could feel the weight of things neither of us wanted to say. "You were always better at her," I said quietly. Jenna's eyes filled for half a second, then cleared. "You were always better for her. She just didn't know how to use that." I almost laughed. "I'm not a tool, Jenna." She nodded. "I know. I know that now." I walked out to the porch. The wind had that smell it gets in late fall dry leaves, and something metallic. Like the air knew winter was waiting behind it. There were 2 chairs out there. One was newer. One still had the faded cushion with a cigarette burn in the corner. Mine. I sat. Inside, I could hear them. Jenna making tea. My mother asking where the comb went. No one answered. Maybe they didn't know. Maybe some things don't want to be found again. I thought about asking my mother one last question. Something simple. Did you ever want to know me? But I didn't. Because that would have meant I still needed something from her. and I didn't. Not anymore. That night, I found one of the old candles she used to keep on the windowsill. The wick was burned halfway down, bent like a spine. I lit it anyway and watched the wax pool slow and silent. It was the first time the house smelled like memory instead of regret. She never asked what I wanted, and I'd stopped asking myself. My mother died in late November. There was no drama, no last breath gasped between words. Just a quiet slipping, like someone stepping off a platform without needing to land. Jenna called me in the morning. Her voice was already on the other side of grief-efficient clear, softened by routine. She said it like she was reading the weather. She's gone. I didn't ask for details. I didn't ask who was there or whether she was peaceful. Those questions are for daughters. I was something else. We planned the funeral together. Rather, Jenna did. I nodded, filled out the forms, signed what needed signing. She chose the flowers, white lilies and yellow roses. I ordered the printed programs. I made sure the photo resolution was high enough. Jenna picked the photo, my mother standing in front of the salon with a scarf knotted at her neck, smiling like she knew she'd left something permanent behind. "Do you want to speak?" she asked. "No," I said. "Are you sure I was?" The service was held at a small chapel on the edge of town, the kind that doubles as a wedding venue. The pews were full. People she hadn't seen in years came, old clients, neighbors, salon friends. They hugged Jenna. They offered stories. One woman cried about a haircut that had changed her life. No one looked at me twice. I stood near the back, black suit, hairpinned, arms crossed loosely at the wrists like I'd learned in formation. The eulogy was short. Jenna delivered it. She said words like grace and fierce and giver. I heard them. I just didn't keep them. After the burial, people gathered in the fellowship hall. There were cookies, coffee. Someone brought a casserole no one touched. I lingered near the photo board. Jenna had done it up well. Glitter pens, glued captions, ribbons. My mother through the years. Prom dress, wedding, first haircut at the Salon, Christmas mornings with Jenna in flannel pajamas. I wasn't in any of them. Not one. Not even a group shot with the corner of my arm. That part hit quieter than I thought it would. Not like a slap. More like a hand resting gently on your chest, reminding you of your shape. I slipped out early. No one noticed. Or maybe they thought I was just one of the distant relatives whose name nobody remembered. I walked home. And I say home because that's still what the house was in structure, if not sentiment. Inside, it smelled like old wood and lemon cleaner. The candles had all been blown out. The rooms were empty, but still held their shapes like mouths after the words have gone. I walked down the hallway slow. Past the mirror she used to adjust her scarf in. Past the framed print of a sailboat that had hung crooked my whole life. And then I stopped in front of the doorway. The same one from all those years ago. The one I'd stood in 13, invisible, listening to her tell Jenna, "You're the daughter I never had." The doorway was still the same. Narrow. Painted in that off-white shade she used for everything bone from the catalog, but really just the color of indecision. I stepped into it. Didn't move. Just stood. I closed my eyes and remembered the light on the linoleum. The scent of hairspray. The sound of two people laughing in a kitchen that never fully belonged to me. And I waited. Not for her. Not for meaning. Just to see what it felt like now. And what it felt like was still. Not empty. Not painful. Just still. I opened my eyes and took one step forward. Through. Not away. Not toward. Just through. I went to my old room, packed the last of my things, folded the quilt, closed the box of letters I hadn't reread. On the dresser was the envelope, the one with the key, still unmailed. I picked it up, pressed it flat under my palm, and carried it with me. Outside, the wind had shifted. You could feel winter coming. The envelope was heavier than it should have been. Just 2 keys inside. Silver. Identical. One still had a worn red tag I'd looped on months earlier to tell it apart. The other had never been used. I held them in my hand like a decision. I didn't write a note. There wasn't anything left to explain. I'd already done the math. The loan, the interest, the upgrades. The quiet hours I'd spent there alone, just walking the perimeter, like a ghost in a place that bore no memory of me. I found a plain envelope in my desk drawer. The kind my mother used for bills. I slipped the keys inside, sealed it, and wrote Jenna Cole on the front in careful block letters. Then I walked it to the mailbox down the road. It was raining. Not hard, but steady, the kind of rain that soaks you without noticing. I stood under the awning for a moment, holding the envelope against my chest. Then I let it go. It hit the bottom of the mailbox with a soft sound. Metal on metal. That was it. No ceremony, no confrontation. Just a final, quiet choice. The next morning, I started looking for work out west. Not in logistics. Not in anything that required precision. I wanted something quieter. I found a consultancy job in Oregon, rural supply management, low overhead housing included. Remote, but not isolated. Something to build. Something to be mine. I didn't tell Jenna. She texted a few days later. "Did you mean to send these?" I didn't reply. She didn't follow up. Some people expect doors to stay open. Some never knock. I left the house 2 weeks later, locked the door, left the spare key inside. I didn't tell anyone I was leaving. I didn't take much. Just 1 box, 1 suitcase, and the photo of my unit in the desert, the one where we're all smiling with our teeth showing dirt in our nails alive in that raw, uncurated way. I drove all day, through rain, then dry country, then through nothing, just flat land and the long line of sky above me. I didn't feel free. I didn't feel triumphant. I felt real. Like I'd finally stopped waiting for someone else to name me. It wasn't that I didn't love them, not Jenna, not even my mother. That was never the question. The question was, could I love myself without needing them to try? Yes. I could. Some people get stars, some get silence. I know how to survive in both. I've made peace with doorways. I've made peace with not being chosen. And I've made peace with what I choose.